The desert sun, a merciless white coin in an indifferent sky, pressed down on the roof of our rented RV. Inside, the air conditioning whined a losing battle. My brother, Jake, his face a map of sunburn and frustration, squinted at the GPS, its cheerful blue line seeming to mock us from the screen. According to this, the turnoff should be right here, Sarah. Well, right here is a whole lot of nothing, Jake, I replied, wiping sweat from my temple. To our left, the red rock cliffs of what was supposed to be southern Utah loomed, magnificent and ancient. To our right, and for miles ahead and behind, there was only scrub, dust, and the shimmering, distorting heat. We never meant for this to happen on our trip. The plan had been simple, beautiful, a 2-week pilgrimage through America's national parks, a final adventure before Jake started his engineering gig in Chicago and I began my student teaching in Portland, a celebration of our sibling bond, sealed with mountain air and campfire smoke. Now, it felt like a slow cooker experiment gone horribly wrong. The disagreement had started mildly, as they often do. A missed exit back near Flagstaff, a debate over whether to take the scenic route or the faster interstate. Jake, ever the pragmatist, voted for speed. I, the dreamer with the camera perpetually around my neck, lobbied for the postcard view. We compromised, which in sibling terms meant we took my route, but Jake got to subtly remind me of the added time at every gas stop. This is why we should have stuck to I-15, he muttered now, not for the first time. This is why we have an adventure vehicle, I shot back, patting the RV's cheap plastic dashboard. To get off the beaten path. To discover that scenic Byway 12 has a dirt road cousin that eats GPS signals for lunch, he said. The tension was a third passenger in the RV, thick and sour. It was more than the missed turn. It was the accumulation of small things, his 2 loud podcasts, my meticulous, slow packing each morning, the way he'd sigh when I asked to stop for another photo. We were both tired, both clinging to a vision of this trip that reality was steadily eroding. That's when we saw the sign. It was old, the paint bleached and cracked, nailed to a warped wooden post that leaned like a tired sentinel. It read, in faint, hand-lettered script, Sunset Canyon 2 miles. A view worth the turn. See, I said, a note of vindication in my voice. A local secret. This is what we came for. Jake frowned. It's not on the map. The road looks like it hasn't been graded since the 70s. We're in a 30-foot house on wheels, Sarah, not a Jeep. It says 2 miles. How bad can it be? Come on, live a little. The phrase tasted like our father, an eternal optimist who'd sent us on this trip with a slap on the back and bring me back a good story. Jake relented, that familiar mix of love and exasperation in his eyes. He turned the bulky RV onto the narrow, rutted track. The vehicle groaned in protest. For the first mile, it was just rough. Then the road, if you could call it that, began to descend sharply, winding around massive boulders. The scrubby brush gave way to the mouth of a canyon, its walls narrowing around us. The temperature dropped a few blessed degrees, but a new kind of chill settled in my stomach. There was no room to turn around. Okay, this is officially bad, Jake said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He was navigating a particularly nasty dip when we heard it, a sickening, metallic scrunch clunk, followed by a violent lurch. The RV listed heavily to the right. Jake killed the engine. The silence was immediate and profound, broken only by the ticking of the cooling metal and the distant cry of a hawk. We looked at each other, all previous irritation wiped away by a wave of pure, cold dread. We climbed out. The back right tire was buried in a deep, sandy wash, but that wasn't the worst of it. The horrible sound had been the RV's rear bumper and a section of undercarriage meeting a sharp, hidden rock ledge. A dark, viscous fluid, oil, or maybe transmission fluid, was already dripping onto the pale sand, forming a spreading, iridescent puddle. No, Jake whispered, kneeling down. No, no, no. He wasn't looking at the leak. He was looking at his phone, held high above his head. No signal. 0 buzz. I pulled out my own phone. Same story. The canyon walls, now towering and majestic, felt like the walls of a beautiful, open-air prison. We were utterly alone. The next hour was a blur of futile activity. We tried digging out the sand with our hands and a flimsy collapsible shovel from the emergency kit. We tried laying the grippy mesh tracks we'd bought as a joke. The RV only settled deeper. We tried walking back up the road to find a spot of signal, but the climb was steep and the heat debilitating. We returned to the RV, defeated and silent. That's when the first tear escaped, a hot track through the dust on my cheek. I'm so sorry, Jake. This is all my fault. He didn't disagree immediately, which hurt more than if he had. He just sat on a rock, head in his hands. It's not just you, he finally said, his voice hollow. I was being a stubborn jerk. I should have just said no. He looked up, his eyes scanning the impossible height of the canyon rim. We never meant for this to happen. We wanted a cool trip. As afternoon bled into evening, the panic slowly metamorphosed into a grim, practical resolve. We had shelter. We had food and water for a few days. We had each other. The initial, childish blame evaporated, burned away by the enormity of our situation. We weren't Sarah and Jake, squabbling siblings anymore. We were two humans in a very tight spot. We developed a routine. Mornings were for conservation and hope. We'd hike to the highest point we could safely reach, holding our phones aloft like ancient offerings. Nothing. We'd leave deliberate, large arrow-shaped rock formations on the canyon road, and a giant sauce spelled out in white rocks we'd painted with sunscreen on a flat, dark boulder near the canyon mouth. Afternoons were for managing our resources. We rationed water, ate canned beans cold, and played endless games of cards in the fading light inside the RV. The silence, once oppressive, became a companion. We started to actually talk, not about the route, or our jobs, but about real things. Jake confessed how terrified he was of moving to Chicago, of the pressure at his new firm. I told him about my deep, secret fear that I wasn't cut out to be a teacher, that I'd stand in front of a class and simply freeze. We talked about our parents, about girls he'd liked and boys who'd broken my heart, about memories from childhood we'd both buried. The canyon walls, lit by the fiery sunset that gave the place its name, became our confessional. On the third night, as a breathtaking canopy of stars, more stars than I'd ever seen, wheeled overhead, Jake said, "You know, if we'd made it to Zion, we'd be in some crowded campground right now, listening to generators. And I'd be bugging you to look at my photos," I said with a weak smile. "I'm sorry I sighed about the photos," he said quietly. "They are actually really good. You see things I don't." It was the first real peace we'd felt since before the trip began. The fourth day brought the storm. It built on the horizon, anvil-shaped clouds boiling over the mesa. The wind came first, howling down the canyon, whipping sand against the RV like 1,000 tiny needles. Then the rain, not a gentle sprinkle but a biblical deluge. We huddled inside, listening to the drumming on the roof. And then we heard a new sound, a low, growing rumble that wasn't thunder. "Flash flood," Jake breathed. We watched in horror from the windows as a wall of muddy water, choked with branches and debris, surged down the main wash of the canyon, just 50 yards from our stranded RV. The sound was a roaring beast. It carved the earth with terrifying power, then was gone as quickly as it came, leaving a scarred landscape and our hearts pounding. It also left something else. As we surveyed the damage at first light, our spirits at their absolute lowest, I saw it, a glint of sun on twisted metal, partly buried in the fresh mud at the canyon's bend. We trudged over. It was the mangled remains of an old pickup truck, long since abandoned, and on its bullet-riddled door was a faded, peeling sticker, "Mob 4x4 recovery, we'll find you." Beneath it was a phone number, the area code clear as day. "Jake," I screamed, pointing. It was a ghost, a relic, but it was a thread to the outside world. We scrambled back to the RV. My phone, sitting on the dash, showed a single, flickering bar of signal. The storm must have shifted something, cleared an atmospheric path. With trembling hands, Jake dialed the number. It rang, and then, a gruff, sleepy voice answered. "Yeah, Moab recovery." Jake nearly wept. He explained our situation, our location as best we could using the canyon's description and the GPS coordinates we'd recorded before we lost signal. The man on the line, who said his name was Hank, listened. "Sunset Canyon, that old rancher road. You're lucky you're not buried. Sit tight. Don't try to move. We'll be there by late afternoon." The wait was agonizing, but it was a hopeful agony. When we finally heard the deep growl of diesel engines and the crunch of proper tires on rock, we spilled out of the RV like castaways sighting a ship. Two massive tow trucks, led by Hank in a weathered Jeep, navigated the treacherous road with an ease that felt supernatural. Hank, a man with a face like worn leather and kind eyes, assessed the situation with a slow whistle. "You two picked a heck of a place to get acquainted with your vehicle," he said, but there was no malice in it. His team worked with efficient grace, winching, stabilizing, and finally, with a mighty heave, pulling the RV free. He confirmed the undercarriage damage was serious, a ruptured oil pan and a damaged brake line. We wouldn't be driving out. They towed the RV. We rode in Hank's Jeep, the canyon walls receding in the side mirrors. He told us how Sunset Canyon was a local legend, a beautiful trap that had claimed more than a few overconfident drivers. "The signs are left over from a rancher decades ago. County's been meaning to take it down. You're not the first, won't be the last." We spent 2 days in the small, dusty town of Torrey while a mechanic performed emergency surgery on the RV. It was expensive. The trip was over, cut short by a week. We loaded up and pointed the patched-up vehicle north, towards home. The drive was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not tense, not filled with unspoken annoyances. It was a peaceful, weary quiet. We'd been through something. Back home, when our parents and friends asked for the highlights, we showed them the few photos I'd taken before the breakdown, the Grand Canyon at dawn, a sunset in Sedona. We didn't lead with the disaster. But late one night, as Jake and I sorted through our things in the garage, he held up the warped Sunset Canyon sign. Hank had gone back and pulled it out of the ground for us as a souvenir. "We should mount this," Jake said, a grin spreading across his face. "A reminder of how stupid we were?" I asked. "No," he said, his voice soft. "A reminder of what we found when we got lost. We never meant for any of it to happen on our trip. We never meant to get stranded, to risk a flash flood, to blow our budget on a massive repair bill. But in failing to find the picture-perfect adventure we'd planned, we stumbled upon a different one. We found that frustration is a luxury that evaporates in the face of real peril. We found that the sibling who could drive you crazy was also the person you trusted with your life. We found that sometimes, you have to get truly lost to remember how to find your way back to each other." The story of our trip isn't about the parks we saw. It's about the canyon we couldn't leave. It's a true story of a plan gone awry, a mistake that turned into a gift, and the unexpected beauty of a broken road. It's the story of how my brother and I stopped being travel companions and started being family again, under a vast, starlit desert sky that witnessed it all. And that's a view that was truly worth the turn.